Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion Implementing a Multi-Cloud Strategy, sponsored by VMware on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests are Mike Wilkerson, the Senior Director for End User Computing for VMware Federal, Frank Konecki, the Chief Technology Officer for the Air Force, Doug Nash, the Chief Information Officer at the Agricultural Marketing Service in the Agriculture Department, and Tim Thorpe, the Director of Enterprise Hosting Division in the Office of IT Operation at the Environmental Protection Agency. At the end of last segment, Mike set us up perfectly, right? You start talking about the platform piece and software as a service. And in many ways, that's where the data center is taking, I think, most agencies, is not just, hey, we're better with the data and the compute side, but really where does the applications live? So let me start with Frank, since I think you and I have talked a lot about this application modernization. Where does software as a service maybe fit, or what platforms, I should say, fit for the Air Force right now, or what are you looking at for your applications as you modernize?
We already have one software as a service already established already. And it's really in the personnel side. It's for everybody in the Air Force. So it's actually working very well. The drawback of that is that you have to take whatever that platform is and utilize it without too much configuration, let's put it that way. You can have some, but you can't have too much, because of the underlying structure that they're going to update that application when they have to based upon releases. And so that's one of the things. And we're looking at other software as a service capabilities also, because we want to get out of the business of actually maintaining applications, in essence. I mean, there's a point where we want to be able to buy everything. I mean, the Air Force is on a buy everything mode, everything as a service capability, because we do not have enough manpower right now to actually do the work. We want to have manpower dedicated to mission. And so when you talk for us, we're always, network as a service, data center as a service, everything as a service is what we want to proceed to. So we're looking at all sorts of other platforms as well to actually support that.
So if the one personnel side is working well, I think this is something I talked with Bill Marion about, the pay and personnel side of it. You said the one challenge is the customization, but that's where things used to go bad so often, is the customization.
That's right.
So isn't that a good trade?
That's a good trade, but you have to convince the users that it's a good trade.
That's the easy part. No, that's not. No. The technology is the easy part.
That's right.
Before. So Doug, let me shift to you. Are you guys starting to look at SaaS a little bit, or are things still in the infrastructure world, or what?
Well, yeah, we're looking at SaaS and PaaS, probably using a lot of platforms as a service right now. As we look at software as a service, where we see the best use cases are around more the administrative system, kind of the non-core mission applications, just like Frank said, in the sense that these administrative systems don't require as much customization, and so they work well off the shelf. We've used certain SaaS products for quite a while. USDA adopted Office 365 and all the collaboration tools back in 2011. Our department-wide travel system is Concur. We use Remedy on Demand for our enterprise help desk. And then, depending upon what parts of Salesforce you use, parts of that, you could consider software as a service, and that's a platform that's growing pretty quickly in USDA. But we see that, and then of course at our enterprise data center within USDA, its primary offering is platform as a service.
I want to go back to the mission side, because I think that's something that we can kind of delve into a little bit. But before I do that, have you had the similar experience that Frank mentioned, is you have to kind of change the processes, change the people, if you will, so they say, well, we can't do it like we used to because the platform doesn't, or the software doesn't allow us.
Right. I mean, it's really tricky kind of getting that sweet spot, but the benefit of going to SaaS is obviously, you don't have to do all the customization, but when you talk to different subject matter experts and users and business areas, sometimes they tend to want to do extreme customization, even if the minimally viable 85–90% works well enough. And I think after you have those conversations with the customer and they see that SaaS does work and there's not that much compromise, it's a pretty easy sell to go with it.
And how much of it is the skin side, right? You can say you can put a front end on it that really can be customized, so it says USDA or EPA, but the back end does all the hard work. Is that most of it what we're talking about here?
I think that's a really good point. It's really the look and feel, and that can be customized for the particular user experience, but the underlying application doesn't have to change.
Because that's all we really care about,
Right.
isn't it? How does it look to me, not what back end. Tim, talk about SaaS at EPA. How are you guys starting to use it or are using it?
Yeah, we are using SaaS. We have a number of SaaS deployments. The most notable to date would be the Microsoft Office Collaboration Suite. In specific, we were shifting our email. We also got SharePoint and OneDrive, and we're leveraging or beginning to leverage OneDrive a little better. So going back a little bit to what Frank and Doug are both talking about, recognize that we do see or have demonstrated that the shift from what we call CapEx to OpEx is beneficial in that there is savings to be derived over a period of time. So we're having pretty good success thus far.
All right, I'm going to throw you a curveball. You ready?
Okay, yeah.
All right, all right.
Mhm.
Not the heater, the curveball. How much savings are you seeing?
Well,
And you can say, I don't know,
no,
because it's a hard question.
Well,
I know that.
that's a great question. One of the things that needs to be clear is when we go to SaaS offering, as Frank was saying, it's a package deal. And so what we found is that it's not apples to apples,
Right.
meaning that what we got in that package was much more than what we had in the legacy application. So it's hard to do that comparison.
Sometimes you're paying the same, but you're getting so much more
Yes, so
capabilities.
much more.
And the savings, well, if we did this old way, it would have cost us X. So that's why I said it was a little bit of a curveball. But you stuck it good. From your experiences moving to O365, Office 365 in the collaboration suite, a lot of that has come right out of the box. Are you starting to look at other back office systems as well for software, or is that further down the road?
It's a little further down the road, but as part of our cloud first strategy, everything gets looked at the appropriate time.
Based on what we talked about earlier,
Correct.
which is contracts, timing,
Correct.
money. Yeah.
Correct.
Right. And that, we could talk about your budget, but we won't. So we're going to talk to Mike instead. Mike, when we talk a little bit about the software as a service and the move to it, what kind of questions, what kind of challenges are you seeing with your federal clients? Because as Frank said, the customization, the change management side is always the hardest when we talk about it.
Yeah, it's a great question. We see a couple of different challenges. One is, we talked about it earlier, cultural. It's the notion of I consumed a particular product or platform a certain way. It brings into consideration contractual issues, paying for a subscription service versus traditional CapEx expenditure. How do you change that? IT organizations have been used to having so much control over every little minute detail from a reporting, auditing perspective. How much of that now have I essentially outsourced in that SaaS model? So having those kind of conversations up front and setting clear expectations with not only IT, but make sure that IT is having that conversation with their consumer as to what the trade-offs are. And believe me, the pluses in a lot of ways outweigh the minuses. The second big concern when you hear cloud in any federal organization, security.
I knew that.
That's number one.
I just knew that.
That's the layup. That's the fastball right down the middle. And it has to do with security. And I think both if you go look at the FedRAMP marketplace and see what's out there now from a software application services perspective, has helped greatly mitigate some of that risk and concern. I think that list of products is growing every day. And they've done a good job in the FedRAMP Program Office of making it a lot easier for the vendor community to become certified and to give that level of assurance. So to kind of summarize that, it's really the cultural, the contractual, and then how do you handle security? And then how do you manage it?
I want to say you may be the first vendor I've ever heard to compliment FedRAMP. I just want to say that.
We had a very positive
If our
experience.
friend from GSA, Matt Goodrich, is listening, I hope he has a little bit of a smile on his face. Because FedRAMP is sometimes it's the security effort that we all love to hate. I do want to go back to one thing you mentioned, the subscription model.
Right.
Are agencies coming around? Are you seeing agencies understanding that it's not just hey, you're going to pay us $1 million to put in this type of software, but you're going to pay us by the user or the usage? I mean, are you seeing that change?
It's shifting. It is. It's getting away from that, I'm just going to buy a fixed amount of perpetual license and continue moving forward. It's moving into, okay, it's really, it follows the same model as sort of the wireless services or internet or WAN services, connectivity services. That's basically a subscription-based model. It's changing my way of thinking and applying that to how I consume software now. So it's trending in the right direction.
Because we're in the third platform.
Right.
But Doug, jump in.
Yeah, the cost part is a tricky part from the software as a service product standpoint, in the sense that vendors cost models vary, and also, some of the applications we use, they could be just a small group of specialists that use them within a particular organization. Others, it could be large numbers of the public accessing it, and how to get the get the right cost model to manage something like that, and also to, from an enterprise perspective, having a consistent way that these you pay for them and the costs are charged. So it's an area that we see there's a bit of a learning curve understanding how that works.
And I know, Tim, jump in real quick, but I know it's also the challenge of who's your customer. Understand that. Tim, jump in.
Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Doug just talked about. So within the federal sector, understand that we have finite budgets, and so what happens is when you have a subscription service, it's pay by the drink, and so you have to watch the utilization, because when you get towards the end of the year, if you've already burned down your budget, you're going to find yourself in trouble, a ratification sort of issue, which we don't want in the federal sector. And so that's one of the things that we're having to kind of make sure we bring up to speed along with our consumption of SaaS.
Yeah, don't do Anti-Deficiency Act stuff.
Exactly.
That's bad.
That's
But
bad.
Mike, you can help them, can't you? I mean, VMware or whomever they're working with could almost put this is going to date me a little bit, but if you remember, to stop someone from driving fast, they could put what was it called, a guard on? A governor. Couldn't you put a governor on it?
Yeah, software vendors can. I mean, we can do that by basically, and we, providing,
Frank's shaking his head, sorry.
it has, operating, being a SaaS provider, you can, give utilization reports, usage reports on a more routine basis. So it's not, as Tim said, it's not a surprise come September 1st that you have this, I hate the term true up, but essentially, oh, you've consumed this over the year. It's a two-way conversation in which we in the vendor community provide, constant visibility in usage reports and analytics, so there are no surprises.
So, Frank, were you laughing at my governor comment, or were you laughing at my idea that you can actually do that in
You
government?
can actually do that in government. I mean, here I have a mission going on. You say, "Oh, I'm going to throttle you back, sir. Don't worry about it."
But I think what they're talking about, though, maybe is less than mission, right? But maybe it's HR, or maybe it's, I don't know. What,
But if you look at it, okay, pay. I'm going to throttle back pay. It's HR.
That's
It's
the problem.
finance. That's the question, and we can't. You have to be very careful about what you throttle back. And the model also is that it varies between the seat model, which Office 365 does, as well as the real consumption of an application. You have to be careful of how you do it. But we found if you contract in the middle of the year, you don't have the troop at the end. You have the troop in the middle, and you can actually keep a contract going, so you get funding.
That's the best practice. We just don't contract on October 1st, but
Middle of the year.
March 1st. Doug, jump in.
Well, the software as a service, I haven't seen as many consumption models on software as a service. It's more like per seat that Frank described. But where we've seen it more is like for the virtual network services and cloud hosting services, and there you definitely do want to have some way to manage consumption, and so that you don't end up blowing your budget through back office activities.
And at the same time, like for instance, certain times you're going to have a bump when people are reporting data back to the agriculture service.
Right, exactly. But that's predictable. It can
Right.
be managed, and you understand business cycles throughout the year and thresholds to manage it. But I think all those are doable, and we're learning how to do that.
Let me shift over, because we'll go back to something that Frank said at the beginning of the conversation of this segment, was for back office it may be fine, but mission, you maybe haven't figured out how to, or what's the best way to do software as a service for mission. Is that something that Air Force is starting to look at as well? Or
We're looking at it as well, but it's more problematic, especially since it's a consumption model we're talking about now, and depending on your mission this week, it may change. You may wipe out of your budget within a month if you're not careful. And so you have to have, is this a must-pay bill or is this not a must-pay bill?
Right.
And then the question is, how fast can you move money around, especially to the various vendors that you have to support that.
but Mike, tell us why that Frank should not worry so much. Can you? Can you?
I can speak from our perspective is some flexibility. We understand the mission criticality, and we're very sensitive to that in terms of we understand things happen, and there's definite I like to equate, there's definite priority placed on certain missions compared to, say, others, where it doesn't make good sense for various reasons
Right.
to do that.
And it's interesting because it's tough because like we talk about, let's say, Frank and his mission areas, we're talking about, if you're flying sorties in Afghanistan or Iraq, the software, whatever you're using, can't fail. But Doug, you have a similar mission where if you're trying to do crop yields or some sort of data that matters, that can't fail either.
Right.
So are you guys also looking at software for mission side or not so much?
It's a mix because some mission area functions are very, very unique, and you don't find equivalent products in industry. But there are others like where we grade and track the quality of produce across the United States, and there are products that Walmart and Sam's Club and others use that could be adaptable to our use within USDA. So it's kind of a mixture.
What about taking something that, let's say, you guys developed within USDA and putting it on a cloud or putting it in a data center that's in the cloud? So it's still your customized application that's mission focused, but just happens to live in the cloud versus living in your data center. That's
yeah, and that's real common. We're working on a particular project right now using ServiceNow, which is going to obviously run out of the cloud. It's a mission application, and that's really our default, is to build it in the cloud, even if it's not software as a service.
right. And Tim, are you guys also mission side? Real quick on the mission side, are you guys looking at where software as a service can fit into meeting your mission goals with new or legacy?
Absolutely. We're doing that, and one of the things that we want to be mindful of is, for example, when we have applications that are servicing on-scene coordinators, for example, we want to make sure we don't run into those types of issues where we bump up against a budget issue and they're not able to do what they need to do, because that is a mission-critical function.
And the budget side is still the hardest, I think, that when we talk about cloud and software as a service and such. Well, let's take a quick break and come back. We can jump into our other favorite topic, and security maybe a little bit, and some other things. You're listening to the panel discussion, Implementing a Multi-Cloud Strategy, sponsored by VMware on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.